This is pretty funny. Apparently, Donald Trump goes on Truth Social the other day, pissed off about not getting credit for Operation Warp Speed. As we talked to Dr. Peter Hotez yesterday, the real failure of Operation Warp Speed was that there were no caps put on what it was going to cost Americans in the future, and no guarantees to availability, and all this money that we dumped into this research. Also, they went with only the sexiest of technologies, whereas Hotez has developed a vaccine that has gone to hundreds of millions of people for basically $3 a pop. But so Trump goes on Truth Social and says, hey, how come I'm not getting credit for Operation Warp Speed? And he gets inundated on his own, literally his own social media site for supporting the COVID vaccination. And here's Charlie Kirk trying to bail out. Put Charlie Kirk up here. This is clip number 12. Here's Charlie Kirk trying to give Trump advice because, well, a ton of your backers are vaccine deniers and COVID deniers. And you wouldn't want them going to Bobby Kennedy.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Email us freedom@charliekirk.com. So I actually, one of these, a couple weeks ago, I was thinking up late at night. I said, boy, imagine all three on the debate stage. You have Trump, Biden, RFK. How should President Trump speak about the vaccine? I think he should speak out the vaccine in this regard. I think he should say, look, there was a time of crisis. And what I did to bring the vaccine companies together under usual circumstances would be considered to be a massive accomplishment. But more and more evidence is coming to light that Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, they were doing some funny business with some of these vaccines. The vaccines certainly did help some people. And I always respected individual autonomy, states' rights, and I never...
What is the funny business? They're charging too much for it now. And the vaccine helped some people.
Millions.
As in millions of people. The research shows that 3 million people's lives were saved.
So be quantitative about the harms, Charlie, if you want to put them up against the millions of people that were saved because of those vaccines.
We know that there were hundreds of thousands, maybe 200,000, depending on who you talk to, who died because they didn't take the vaccine because of what Charlie Kirk said. We also know that the vaccines, not unlike the flu vaccine, inhibit the spread of COVID. So we know that a significant portion of people did not get it because of the vaccine. Was it 50% effective? I mean, it changed depending on which vaccine you got and what variant you were exposed to and when. But did it reduce spread by 50% at one time? 40%, 60%, preventing God knows how many people who are going to have long COVID, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the story that Charlie Kirk thinks that Donald Trump should tell in the imaginary debate with RFK and Joe Biden.
RFK. How should President Trump speak about the vaccine? I think he should speak out the vaccine in this regard. I think he should say, look, there was a time of crisis. And what I did to bring the vaccine companies together under usual circumstances would be considered to be a massive accomplishment. But more and more evidence is coming to light that Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, they were doing some funny business with some of these vaccines. The vaccines certainly did help some people. And I always respected individual autonomy, states' rights, and I never forced the vaccine, and I never will force the vaccine. For some older Americans, I believe that the vaccine helped them. For some younger people, it is a crime that they were forced to get it against their will. And as president, I will authorize a full investigation into Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, so that we'll find out if they told me the truth during Operation Warp Speed.
Pause it for 1 second. Right now, as we speak, the private citizen Robert Hur, who left the Department of Justice, is talking with the House Judiciary Committee because the Republicans want him to talk about how old Joe Biden is. The Republicans have controlled Congress for going on 18 months now, 15 months. They could be holding hearings. Are they still like looking for the $5 million? Are they just afraid that every one of their witnesses are going to end up in jail because they're going to have to lie to testify? The Republican Party controls Congress, the House right now. They could be having deep, deep investigations into this. I wonder why they're not. Go ahead.
It's all bullshit.
Some of these vaccines. The vaccines certainly did help some people. And I always respected individual autonomy, states' rights, and I never forced the vaccine, and I never will force the vaccine. For some older Americans, I believe that the vaccine helped them. For some younger people, it is a crime that they were forced to get it against their will. And as president, I will authorize a full investigation into Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, so that we'll find out if they told me the truth during Operation Warp Speed, so that people can get clarity and eventually justice. Boom, end of answer. That way, it's not apologizing. It's not about, backing away. That is a perfectly balanced approach. I want to play some more tape here of Robert F. Kennedy. And I'm not saying this as a commercial for him, but this sort of approach can win you 10,000 votes here, 20,000 votes here, 30,000 votes here. Play cut 12, please.
So, and nobody's saying, why is this happening? And we know why it's happening. It's high fructose corn syrup, and it's, glyphosate and neonicotinoids and atrazine and all the other crap that is in our food. We're not feeding people, we're poisoning them.
We're not feeding people, we're poisoning them.
What's interesting about this? I just want to say that he's not playing RFK talking about the vaccines.
Yeah, right.
Because he is afraid. And this is why he would be terrified of having a debate with RFK on the stage. Because the fact is that there's a good chance you put RFK on the stage, he's going to take more from Trump. If the questions center around things like vaccinations, like vaccination schedules, like Kenny is held to account for what he has said about vaccinations in the past. And we've gone through this many times. And that's what I think why Charlie Kirk is even bringing this up, because he's nervous about it. They are nervous that Kennedy is going to eat into Donald Trump's numbers because of the anti-vax crew. I mean,
right.
Yes.
He's not eating into Dems, really, is he?
What's that?
Is maybe the polling, I don't know.
I mean, I think he is to a certain extent, but I think it's more on the grounds of his last name.
Right.
I mean, we saw the ad that ran over the Super Bowl. It was completely associating himself with his uncle's campaign. It wasn't, policy based in any way. Go ahead.
It's high fructose corn syrup, and it's, glyphosate and neonicotinoids and atrazine and all the other crap that is in our food. We're not feeding people, we're poisoning them.
We're not feeding people, we're poisoning them. Now, that might seem like a fringe issue, but if you go back to the Charlie Kirk Show podcast page, and we have this amazing community, by the way, that's growing, members.charliekirk.com. It's growing like crazy. It's amazing. And one of the first questions we got is, Charlie, when is Trump going to talk about food? I'm telling you, it's a top level issue for moms, especially for people of all different ages. Obesity, type 1 diabetes, what we are feeding our kids.
Hey, let's talk about capping insulin.
What's the critique? Like, food? Who's feeding us? Is it government bureaucrats, or is it like capitalists who own all the...
Well, that's the amazing thing about this. That's the amazing thing about it. I mean, we do subsidize corn in this country as an industrial policy that was started by Nixon's Commerce Secretary as a way of making food cheaper so that Americans would have more disposable income. So we subsidize corn. They use corn to feed all the livestock, to basically put a filler in all the foods, to create fake sugar, essentially. And it is, I have no doubt, this stuff is incredibly unhealthy for you. I try and have my kids avoid it at all costs, et cetera, et cetera. It is conjecture on my part, although I think there's a decent amount of research out there, et cetera, et cetera. The idea that a Republican president who has been running on the idea of destroying the administrative state is going to come out and say, we need to regulate what foods are in it. In fact, we got a clip where somebody's complaining about what, and we'll get to it in a second. I don't know if we want to do more of this, where there is a product in American sodas that has been outlawed in Europe for, like, in some instances, decades, that the FDA is finally coming around to get the nerve to say, we shouldn't do this because it looks like it's poisoning people.
Too much freedom?
Too much freedom. But I want to hear Charlie Kirk talk about how we should have government have more control over our food supply. I'm down with that. In fact, let's have government-run supermarkets in food deserts so we can actually get high-quality produce into areas where there is no choice for people who live in low-income areas to get high-quality food.
One of the first questions we got is, Charlie, when is Trump going to talk about food? I'm telling you, it's a top-level issue for moms especially, for people of all different ages. Obesity, type 1 diabetes, what we are feeding our kids. Not to mention the suicide epidemic. We cannot keep our eye off this. This is another one, cut 4. The average person who died.
Hugo's karaoke fun time says, Ad hominem says, these people freaked out that Michelle Obama tried to get more vegetables in school lunches. And they think President McDonald's is going to fix our food system? What's the next clip he plays?
Died from COVID, had 3.8 chronic diseases. That's what killed them. This is the clarity that I think is necessary.
Blame the people who died.
COVID, health, lockdowns, it's going to become a top tier issue. And let's kind of go back into the 1992 election. Ross Perot won 0 electoral votes. By the way, many of you are emailing me, freedom@charliekirk.com. I was one of the Perot voters. It makes perfect sense. If you're a Trump supporter now and you were a pro voter then, perfect. I totally see the connection. Perot was the canary in the coal mine. Perot was the Mr. Smith goes to Washington independent businessman. One of my great regrets is that Perot and Trump never were able to before he died, come together and see themselves as successors of the same movement. And it was a race to 43%. Again, very few people are talking about this. If you talk to the average low IQ consultant that used to infest the RNC, thankfully we have a new regime there. What do you mean a race to 43%? It's a 2-person race. It's not a 2-person race. Fringe issues very well might end up defining this election. Now, I don't even like the word fringe. I should correct my language. That's not, let's just say second or third or fourth tier issues. For example, coming up next month, we have Dr. Miriam Grossman.
All right,
coming to a Freedom Night.
Advertisement, the dumbass stuff he's talking about. That's why they're nervous about RFK, is if the anti-vax stuff becomes more prominent. They want to get this over with. They want to get it out of the way somehow.